Hello and good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for the live discussion of what's going on. So we are joined today by the Labour MP for the North West Cambridgeshire constituents. His name is Sam Carling and pleased to welcome him here today. He's got into politics and progressed really quickly. He only studied at Cambridge University and then became a councillor for Cambridge City Council and then won the constituency over the Conservative seat. So Labour took over and that was a new generation of MP in the cabinet. And so politics are changing massively and this is a big change at the moment. So this afternoon we're going to have a discussion with Sam, have a look at his journey into politics, think about Parliament, what's going on there, and just to find out more about the background of Parliament. We're also going to talk about the challenges and what's going on for members of his constituents. We're also going to chat about issues that are linked to deaf people, accessibility, and our government rolling their sleeves up and getting proactive on sorting out issues for the deaf community. Later on, we'll also have a look at the other issues that are affecting Labour and politics in general, like the economy. I want to check, do you feel confident within the Parliament or not? We're going to have a look at the Labour leadership as well and have a think of what the plans are for now and for the future of Labour. So it's really important, if you could, please ask any questions, share comments, and we'll ask them today. So thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome. So my first question, so you're known within Parliament as the baby of the house. How do you feel about that term?
It's a strange one, really, isn't it? I think people often, if they're using that, mean it in a sort of friendly, jokey way. It can get a little bit annoying, I guess. But I've never really noticed that anyone treats me differently because I'm a young MP. There were quite a few of us after the general election under 30. I think there were 10 in total. It might vary a little bit from that. And we've all gotten on really well, I think. I get on really well with my colleagues. I'm able to get involved with all the work that he's doing, represent my constituents effectively. So I don't think it's made too much of a difference. I think the media often find it quite interesting at first when there's quite a young MP elected, but I'm not the youngest one in recent times. There was an MP from the Scottish National Party who was elected when she was a bit younger than I was. I was 22 when I was elected in 2024. That was a couple of parliaments ago. So it's not too unusual, but yeah, every parliament has its youngest MP.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So I'm really curious about your journey into politics. How did you get there? Were you always passionate about politics growing up? Are you able to explain a bit more about your life, I suppose briefly, your background and what led you into politics?
Absolutely. So I grew up in the northeast of England in actually quite a religious family, so Jehovah's Witness family, and they don't really do politics as part of that religion. And although I lost faith in it and became a non-religious person when I was about 13 or 14, that not really being involved in politics aspect sort of stuck with me, I suppose. And I think there's lots of young people who grew up in non-political families who therefore don't really know how to engage with politics and how to develop an interest in it until maybe something happens that then makes them view things differently. So in my case, I was in the first group of students whose A-level exams got cancelled during the pandemic when I was in sixth form, and that kind of made me see how direct decisions being made by government in Westminster were impacting on people's lives, really. I had friends who lost university places. I had, others who struggled in different ways. And it made me realise that a lot of the issues that I was worried about growing up, so things like my local hospital having wards closing, the high streets having shops shut, not being able to get a doctor's appointment, my school's sixth form closing, lots of things. It made me realise that they were political issues driven by kind of government and budget decisions. And so from that point, I decided that I wanted to get involved.
Oh, brilliant. And then how did you get involved? So what is the first sort of step from going from that background and that interest? If somebody's thinking, okay, I will need to do something about this, specifically, how would you go from having that thought to being active and getting involved within your local area? What did you sort of do? What was your first sort of, I suppose, step and taster into politics?
So I spent some time researching the different political parties that we have in the UK, and I decided that actually it was the Labour Party whose values and kind of ideals and aims I'm most aligned with. So I joined it. I think that not that many people actually know that joining a political party is something that you can do, open to very much anybody, and you know, there's a real kind of drive and push for more people to do that and more people to get involved in politics in their local area. There's always opportunities and things to be involved. So I really encourage people to join a party if there's one that you think aligns with you. From there, I got involved a bit in some local campaigns while I was in the North East, but it was quite quickly then that I moved down to Cambridge for university, and it was there that I decided I wanted to stand to be a councillor, because again, it's something that lots of people don't realise you can do, but councillors represent the local community and make decisions about local services on, you know, that local council. So Peterborough City Council, where we are now, but it was Cambridge City Council that I stood for election to. And it's a part-time role, really. It can fit around like a full-time job or kind of studying, in my case. Or equally, if people want to sort of do it who are retired or, you know, don't have employment for some other reason, that works too. So it can be very flexible. And so it really worked for me, and I think it's a good way for people to start to get involved in politics if anyone kind of wants to go into it career-wise, or even if people just want to be involved at that level and stay there, as many people do, and as I perhaps would have if I'd stayed with the original career I was going to go down.
Oh, brilliant. So what did you study then previously? What was your interests? What did you read?
I did science at university, specifically biology, and that was because I just really loved understanding how the world works, and, you know, particularly how life works, really. And for a long time, I wanted to go into a career in either research or in like teaching at a university level, which I really enjoyed when I've done some teaching in the past. So I studied that. I'd always had the advice that, you know, it's best to kind of study something that you really enjoy, because at the time, yeah, as I say, I wanted to go down that route. But when I was at university, I discovered that actually the research aspect of it wasn't really something I enjoyed. I loved learning about science academically, but when you then have to focus that down and really hone in on one specific thing that you research for a long time, I just found that really wasn't the direction I wanted to go down. So at the same time, I had been elected as a councillor while I was a student, and I was really loving that. And so I decided actually I wanted to go into politics full time from there. And then the general election came up at quite an opportune time.
Yeah, definitely. You said from councillor to MP. That was very quick for you, wasn't it? That was a very short amount of time. So, like, how did you juggle that? Did you feel intimidated? I mean, if it was me, to be honest, I think going from that, you've obviously moved areas. You know, you've got into politics at a young age. It could feel quite overwhelming for you. How did you navigate that scenario?
It's a really good question. I think I've spent a lot of my life being around people significantly older than me. It started off really when I was quite young in that religious community. I was one of the only kind of children there. It was mostly older people. So I guess I've always been used to like speaking to and working with older people, even from then. So then when I went to university, I got involved in sort of student representation within my college and the university. I was on the university's board, the university council, for a while as the elected student member. So I was kind of used to engaging with people in that format. And so I think I never really felt too big of a jump when I then went into being a councillor, or indeed when I came into Parliament from that sense, because it didn't feel too different of an environment in that way. but obviously the actual scale of the job and of the work that we do is very different, and everyone has to kind of pick up and learn on the job in many ways, because there's really no role quite like it, particularly being an MP, because you are at the same time like the CEO of a small business almost, with kind of 5 or 6 staff. You are a representative. I represent about 100,000 people, as most MPs do. That's about the right number. And you're also a legislator, trying to look at how the law perhaps needs to change in certain areas. And you do casework. So there's just such a variety of things. And I think regardless of what like age someone comes in, it's a really steep learning curve for anyone.
Thank you. So you talk about, all those people that are in your constituency, and obviously previously that had been a very safe Conservative seat, hadn't it, for a long time. And when you went up against them, did you genuinely believe that you could win that area and win that seat? Obviously it's very competitive, and you were against Shailesh Farah. Could you explain what it felt like at that time?
It was really strange, because there was this big national tide and sort of unhappiness with the Conservatives and sort of desire for change at the time. But equally, I knew it was historically a really safe Conservative seat. So I didn't know what was going to happen, is the honest answer. And I kind of had a moment where I thought to myself, well, look, I can either kind of get my hopes up, think I can do it, and then potentially be really disappointed if I don't, or I could convince myself I can't win and then be quite demoralised and not really feel able to try as much. And I just thought to myself, why do either of those things? I'm just going to not think about the result, campaign as hard as I can, just do the best job that I can here and try to win. And that's what happened. And I have to say, the campaign was a really positive experience. I'm sure Shailesh would say the same, but there was no unpleasantness at all. Everyone got on. It was actually a really nice moment where I was getting some sort of abuse online, and he messaged me to say that, he could see that what was happening and hoped I was okay, which I think was really nice. And we need more of that in politics, around just people recognising that, we might have political differences, but actually, we're all in this for the right reasons. We all want to make a difference. It's just often we have disagreements about the direction that things need to go, or how to do that. And everything works so much better when people can have those discussions and debates in a kind of, friendly, reasoned way. And to be honest, there's a lot more of that in Parliament than people think. The media often report on sort of fiery debates in the House of Commons chamber, but there is a lot goes on behind the scenes where people work together a lot more and kind of try to get to the solutions to issues and make those happen.
Really interesting. You talk about that sort of online abuse that you experienced. Was that the first time you really felt like, I'm getting attacked for this? And obviously, when you went through your campaign, did you feel there was sort of a lot of pressure? How did you feel when you were doing all of that?
It's interesting because, I did get quite a lot of online abuse in advance of the election, and I still get quite a lot now. And, it comes from all sorts of kind of aspects. People have a go at my age reasonably often, but to be honest, I think it's the sort of people that would have a go at something, regardless, right? And what I think is really important to get across is it's not like that in person at all. During the campaign and since, I spent a lot of time knocking on doors and speaking to people directly, and the overwhelming majority of the time, regardless of if people disagree politically, we have a really good conversation, and I can understand people and people can understand me, and it just works much better that way. So the message I have to anyone that perhaps sees the online abuse that I get is it's really not like that in person. And I think kind of getting out of that social media world and back into the real world is really important, because I think a lot of young people who might be interested in going into politics, not just young people, anyone really, who sees that, it can very easily put them off. And so I always try to get across that, it's not the case that it's that bad really. Oh, and the other part of your question around pressure, I think my constituency, because it was such a safe Conservative seat at the time, we didn't really expect to win it at kind of a national level. Obviously, we didn't know, but it wasn't like a key target seat for the Labour Party. Very understandably, we took the decision as a party of, look, we need a certain number of seats to get into government, so we're going to put most of our resources and kind of really target those seats in order to then be able to deliver for the whole country in government. And any kind of other seats that we win, great, that's good, obviously. But we didn't expect to win too many of those. And in the end, there were about 20 seats like that, where we perhaps didn't expect to win, and we didn't put too much resource into them, other than what the local candidates were doing. And I did do quite a lot there, but yeah, there were about 20.
Oh, that's brilliant. Great work. So the audience, please, if you have any questions or comments in response to what Sam's chatting about, please post them and ask away, because I can share them on your behalf. The other question that I want to say was, obviously, has Labour always been sort of your political home, or did you think that you might want to get into a different political party?
So as I say, when I was originally looking into the different political parties, I think there were lots of values across them that really resonated with me. I mean, you know, Labour has always historically stood for fairness, for justice, for helping out people who are struggling, all of which really worked well with me. But equally, you know, a lot of the time, the Conservatives have historically said, you know, and put the view forward that they are kind of the party of ambition and, you know, trying to, you know, help people be in a situation where, you know, they can work hard and do well in life. But when I was thinking about that, really, I didn't think that their kind of actions under the kind of governments at the time really reflected that. And I felt that actually, you know, that there's not a level playing field in this country. It's not the case that anyone from anywhere can just get to wherever they want through pure hard work. There are barriers in people's way, you know, whether it be that certain schools are not up to standard, or there's kind of financial difficulties that might be stopping people achieving their full potential. I very much believe that we need to deal with those barriers in order to create that environment where anyone can thrive. And so actually I felt that it was very much the Labour Party that kind of had the right approach to the issues I was worried about.
Thank you. And what do you feel like your long-term ambition is when you're involved in politics?
I don't know. I'm lucky in that I'm only 24 now, and, you know, lots of people come into Parliament much later than me and then go on to have, you know, significant careers in government. So I'm not in a rush. We will see what happens at the next election. Obviously, you know, things are very volatile at the moment. We are seeing really quick kind of changes in people's support from one political party to another. We saw that, you know, we had that very significant jump towards Labour from the Conservatives at the general election. But then since then, we've had the kind of rise of Reform and the Green Party on sort of two very different sides of politics. And, you know, that's only in 2 years, and there's another 3 until the next election. So anything could happen. And I think my main focus for the time being is very much, look, I've got a very small majority in North West Cambridgeshire. I won by 39 votes. I want to deliver for the people in my constituency. There's lots of things need doing. We have lots of issues. We've got problems around crime, around lack of access to healthcare, lack of housing for people, a need to kind of boost the natural environment. There's so many different things need to be done. So for the time being, I'm very happy on focusing on all of those. There's lots to do.
Yes, so if I could ask you, what's it like in Parliament? What surprised you the most by being there?
It's really, really bizarre. Lots of the way things work feel very sort of old and, you know, antiquated. But when you look at sort of the way some of the kind of rules and systems are set up, they are there for a reason a lot of the time. Like, people often see this way that you speak in the House of Commons chamber, where you address people in the third person, because you're always speaking to the impartial chair, the Speaker of the House. And so it takes some getting used to, like, talking about people who you're looking at and can see in the third person, and saying, you know, does the honourable gentleman over there think this, that and the other, when I'm kind of talking to that person but not. But the reason for that is it helps to create more civil debates because you can't sort of directly talk to. It's much harder when you think about the way language is set up to like be argumentative or unpleasant when you're speaking through an impartial third party. It's a bit like you're sitting in. It's a bit like the three of us sat here now, and if I'm sort of speaking to you, Matthew, sort of being very rude about BB, the lovely interpreter who's helping us out, it would just be really bizarre. It doesn't come naturally, so that rule helps you there. And there's various other rules as well that are set up for similar reasons. But you know, the architecture is amazing. Often it still sort of comes back to me in waves where I might just be wandering around, going about my business, and just suddenly think, wow, you know, I'm in Parliament, this is amazing. And I don't think that'll ever go away. It's a real privilege to be able to work there.
Oh, that's lovely. So I've got a question, obviously. I know there's going to be a lot of deaf people watching today. What do you think Labour can achieve for deaf people and for the deaf community?
I think accessibility is really, really important, and kind of hearing the voices of deaf people and kind of getting those perspectives in and kind of understanding where the issues are is really, really important, because I think we have a sort of chicken and egg problem almost, where sometimes because of the accessibility problems, politicians don't get to hear from deaf people about what the problems are, so therefore we don't know and we can't fix them, if that makes sense. So I very much want to try to build bridges and kind of break down barriers so that I can better understand what the issues are facing the deaf community. I had a really useful discussion with Cambridgeshire Deaf Association recently where we explored a lot of those issues, particularly around healthcare, and sort of certain hospitals in our local area aren't very good at having interpreters ready for people, and so we need to work on that. But that's not something that I necessarily knew about beforehand, but it's something that I can then take away and work on. So it's a lot of those sorts of issues that I feel locally we can start to get some work done on if I start to know about them, and I'm very happy to sort of make that a priority.
That's brilliant. Because as you know, with Parliament, there's a lack of access, you know, for national announcements. They don't have interpreters. How do you get that information out? And a lot of the deaf community they're finding it's too late. Do you think it's possible to be able to change that? Obviously, we're in 2026 now, and accessibility should be high up there, but for the deaf community and the sign language users, there hasn't been much change up till now.
No, absolutely. And so the House of Commons itself, there is like a live stream channel online, and there is a option that has a sign language interpreter. So that's really good within the House of Commons itself. And equally for people who are not fully deaf but are hearing impaired, if they're there in person, there is a hearing loop and there's that sort of features. But actual announcements made outside of Parliament, I agree, there's a lot of difficulty there. There's lots of problems around lack of interpreters and them not being brought in. And I think given the whole different variety of media now that we have, you know, we have TV, we have radio, we have sort of social media, all of those different formats, we as politicians are often kind of trying to produce content that works across all of them, and often we're not very well resourced. So speaking about my own circumstances, I have a very limited staffing budget. When I'm putting comms out, like, I don't have access to an interpreter to sort of help with that, and so I'm very keen to kind of understand what techniques I can use to sort of make the stuff that I put out more accessible, and I'm sure lots of other MPs are in the same situation. We make sure that all my videos are subtitled, but I know, of course, that actually it's not the best. We do want to have sign language interpretation available as well. And so if there are kind of ways that we can make that happen, I'd be very happy to look into it. And I'm sure others feel the same way.
Really good. I'm just thinking about the deaf community. Sometimes they feel like they're second-class citizens because that information isn't out there in BSL. Would you agree with that statement?
I mean, I think I don't want to sort of put words into the mouth of deaf people because I'm not deaf myself, but I accept that that's what you're telling me, and that's obviously really, you know, sad to hear that people feel that way. And yeah, all I can really do is sort of say again, I'm very keen to hear how we can resolve that, where the specific issues are, if there's certain sort of types of announcements that consistently don't have accessible ways to interpret them. I'd really value having that fed back, and then I can in turn feed it back to government and sort of try to get changes made where needed.
Start. But I think for that, the national announcements need to be accessible with sign language interpretation. But if you could really pass that on, that would be much appreciated. So now I think I might talk about the cost of living. As you know, it's a big thing on the agenda at the moment. If you think about sort of normal family lives as such, and how their lives and the cost of living has been impacted, how do you think we can sort of solve those issues that are out there at the moment?
Yeah, there is a huge cost of living problem at the moment, absolutely, and there's lots of things that we're trying to do to help with it. So we're doing things like trying to keep people's energy bills down through measures that we took at the last budget to change some sort of levies that are put onto electricity providers, but equally with the conflict that's going on now in Iran and the kind of the oil supply issues, we've got problems there as well. And there's lots of people in my constituency, particularly in more rural areas, who use heating oil to heat their homes. There's not that many nationally when you look at it, but sort of obviously for each one of those people that's affected, that's really important. And if their oil prices are suddenly going really high up, that's going to have a devastating impact on their finances. So we need to sort of help out with that. We're trying to keep inflation down in order to stop food prices going any higher than they are. But of course, that's very hard to do, and there's various ways in which conflicts overseas, but also just production problems, even climate change as well, is making that worse. So there's a whole kind of economy-wide problem that's really difficult to fix. But there are more kind of grants and reliefs that are being made available as well through councils. So there was something called the Household Support Fund, which we've replaced with something called a Crisis and Resilience Fund, which councils can use to help people in need in their local area in whatever ways they think is most appropriate. So we've made that more flexible than it was before. And there's lots of other support that we're trying to provide. We've raised the minimum wage as well. But equally then that has an impact on business, understandably. So there's lots of very complicated things we have to juggle and balance. But we're really trying to prioritise the cost of living because it's affecting everyone.
Yeah. And what do you think, what is the, Labour policy? Are they getting enough credit, for the work that they're doing?
That's a really good point. And I mean, obviously I'm a bit biased about that. I would say the answer is, we are doing a lot, and it hasn't always felt as though some of those stories have been reflected very well. Some of that is that we've maybe not communicated very well. Equally, I think there's difficulty around like some of the platforms that people are now getting their news from is not the platforms that government is particularly good at delivering on. So, lots of people pick up headlines, things from social media now. And because of this kind of attention-based economy that we have online now, also we have problems where lots of people will see headlines, but will not read the articles underneath them. And so when you get more kind of sensationalist headlines, that can be really difficult in terms of like, there's not really the space for us to convey the like complicated nature of some of the issues we're trying to deal with. And I don't really know what the answer is to that. It's always going to be much easier for sort of people who put forward easy answers that don't really work to get those across, rather than the kind of slightly more complicated detail of what the government's doing in a lot of these spaces.
Brilliant, thank you. So now, if you don't mind, we're going to move on to Keir Starmer. And you were one of the MPs that signed a letter that thought he should step down. Could you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, that was a really hard thing to do actually, because I have a lot of respect for the Prime Minister. I think he has taken on a really difficult set of issues since the general election, and I think he's made a lot of the right calls on a lot of the big issues, particularly around kind of this war in Iran. He kept us out of that. But fundamentally, I think there have been a number of mistakes made that have overshadowed a lot of the really positive work that we've done. And I think some of the kind of overarching vision and story and ability to communicate, what we're doing, our ideas, our values, is not really there under Keir's leadership. And that's why I made the decision that actually I think it will be better for kind of, the country and for the people that we as MPs serve if we do have leadership change within the Labour Party. Although that's a very difficult thing to say because I still have a lot of respect for Keir.
So some people would argue that the government, hasn't had enough time yet. Do you think 2 years has been plenty of time to make these sort of judgments and changes?
As I say, we inherited a really, really difficult situation, and I think we always knew that was going to take a long time to resolve and to get on top of. But some of the kind of lack of political judgment that has been shown with some of the problems that we've had and some of the mistakes that I think have been made isn't something that time will change. I think it's a case of without new leadership, I don't think those areas are going to get any better. And I mean, we've just had those local election results that really have kind of shown what people think of the Labour Party at the moment, which is really painful because, that lots of good Labour councillors across the country have lost seats. These are people who've been doing fantastic work, and people have voted on national issues, which is, understandable. I can get that. But it's led to real difficulties, and I think we're going to see a lot of councils having quite bad leadership as a result of that, which we've started to see coming through in the news, and I think there'll be more of that to come.
Yeah. And so with the sort of support of Keir Starmer, we've obviously got the issues with the economic growth, with inflation index. Do you feel like there's a sort of a danger at the moment of a knee-jerk reaction and sort of how the public are going to respond because of what's been happening and what Keir's been doing?
I think it goes back to some of what I've just talked about in terms of the way that we're communicating. I don't think it's knee-jerk what's going on at the moment. I think people have been thinking about this for quite a while. It's not just happened after the local elections. We saw the parliamentary by-election in Gorton and Denton a little while ago now, back in February. And we had poor local election results last year as well in 2025. So it's not just happened in the last sort of month. I think we've been wrestling with these questions sort of in private for quite a while now, and so it's at this stage where I think lots of people within the Labour Party, and particularly within the Labour MPs, have come to the conclusion that we now need to sort of make something happen here and have leadership change. So I appreciate the point. I think it is important that we keep going in terms of keeping inflation down, kind of keep the markets in a situation where they have confidence and are not, them making knee-jerk reactions that's then causing inflation on government borrowing interest on government borrowing to go up. That's really important, but I think that can be done provided that we, all keep cool heads and have a sensible, calm leadership contest that's not unpleasant. And I think both of the main contenders in that contest are likely to be Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham, and I think both of them will do a good job of keeping it positive and being respectful and having a contest of ideas and about direction and not about personalities.
Yeah, thank you. So we've had a question through. So who's your political ideal hero?
That's really hard because, as I say, because of my upbringing and kind of not really thinking much about politics for a long time, there wasn't really like a political hero that brought me into wanting to be in politics. There's various politicians I have a lot of respect for. I particularly like Elizabeth Warren, who is a senator in America, who does a lot of really good work to hold big financial institutions, sort of particularly banks, and you know, people who lend money and have potentially been going through really unfair practices. She holds them to account very well, and I think proposes lots of good ideas for protecting ordinary people from that sort of industry and putting in place good regulation. So I like the way that she does that. Yeah, and there's various other kind of people that I think haven't necessarily influenced me, but whose work I really respect.
Thank you. So I hope that answers your question. Please give some more comments or questions. Anything that you would like to ask Sam today, please ask us. We've got about 20 minutes left, so please respond. So Sam, would you be able to sort of share your experience? So recently, I know you came in and met deaf sign language users and the hard of hearing community across Cambridgeshire. Would you be able to expand sort of on your experience of that, your feelings of that, what you felt you took from that meeting and were able to take away, and how you potentially could improve the services for deaf community in this area?
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable question. And what really struck me first of all, which I kind of knew beforehand but was really good to see in person, is just the different types of hearing difficulties that people had. So we had people who could still hear but were hard of hearing. We had people who were fully deaf and always had been. We had people who lost their hearing sort of during their lifetime, and sort of seeing how people's accessibility needs differ as a result of that was really valuable. You know, we had some people who were lip reading me and were comfortable doing that. We had some people who had an interpreter. We had others who could still hear but perhaps had hearing aids and such like. So that kind of different levels of accessibility need was really powerful to learn more about, I think. And we talked a lot, as I said earlier, about healthcare and the lack of accessibility there. Also public transport, where when trying to communicate where you're trying to go or looking at how to get certain places, that was really useful to see. Education as well, and the difficulties with finding schools that can accommodate deaf children, and then maybe having to travel really long distances to get to those schools. So there's a lot of work we need to do, particularly to sort of improve practice in the medical centres around the area that aren't doing a very good job of that already. There were some that did seem to be, so maybe there's some kind of learning that needs to be transferred from them to those that need to do a better job. Within the education space, similarly, we need to look at how we can provide more spaces for deaf children, both in deaf schools, but also for those who would prefer to go to a normal school, or a school for children who aren't deaf. We want to be able to facilitate that as well, and take into account the kind of preferences that individual children might have. So there's a long way to go in delivering that.
Yeah, so I was sort of wondering how you felt after that meeting as well, because I was there when you were there, sorry, and I saw your passion, and you could see the passion of the deaf community, the struggles of the deaf community, and I suppose being there and seeing it from the other side, how did you feel? So I suppose that was your first bit of immersion into the deaf community and all the struggles and lack of accessibility. What did you sort of take away from it?
Well, I mean, the fact that not enough is being done, I suppose, is what I took away. And as I say, it was really valuable to just hear those personal stories directly, so that then gives me the kind of ammunition, if you will, that I need to go away and press for change in these areas where it's not being delivered quickly enough. And there were some really terrible stories that people were telling me about issues that they had, that, you know, you really feel shouldn't be happening to people. And there's a lot to do there.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully we will see those changes in the future. So we've had a question come through. So what happens if Andy Burnham doesn't win the by-election? What then?
Well, I don't know. We will have to see. There's all sorts of different possibilities that could happen. Obviously, we have had Wes Streeting, who was until recently the Health Secretary, say that he is going to stand if there's a leadership contest. So we will see if he does. He said he will. There may be other people come forward if Andy Burnham doesn't get elected in Makerfield, but we don't know. Lots of people haven't really made their intentions clear. So, and to be honest, I think a lot of people haven't decided what they're doing either. So it's very hard for me to answer because I don't know either. I'm as in the dark as other people are about it, and we'll have to wait and see, really, is the only solution.
No, thank you. So, do you worry that Labour looks a bit divided, or do you feel that it is still showing as quite a stable party?
I think whenever there's disagreements within a party about something, it can be looked at in two ways. It can be portrayed as either the party is divided, or it can be seen more positively as having a discussion about an issue and trying to come to a conclusion on it. And I think for a very long time, we've seen any hint of different ideas or perspectives within a party as being division and a bad thing, when actually sometimes it's positive to sort of have different perspectives on an issue and be able to discuss them openly and, come to a conclusion about what the best direction forward is. It's not always the best approach to totally shut out alternative perspectives. Sometimes you'd rather hear them, and then if you disagree with them, well, then we should be able to win the argument, really. So I'm really keen that we get back to kind of that sort of culture, because at the end of the day, there's 400 Labour MPs. We're not all identical people. We all come in with different perspectives, different ideas, different backgrounds, and we all come in on a shared manifesto, and quite rightly, that's the manifesto that we are elected to deliver. But there's also lots of issues where, they weren't in the manifesto, they weren't things that we knew about at the time, or they kind of are things that have become more important as issues more recently. And so we need to have that kind of discussion and debate about those issues. But I do still feel quite strongly that we have to deliver that manifesto that we were elected on. That's the key thing, because it's been really difficult, I think, for people to see politicians promise a certain set of things and then get into power and do something else. So that's absolutely not what we should be doing. It's very much about delivering what we said we'd deliver and making sure that it happens.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have another question, and thank you very much for asking it. So the question's asking, who is the biggest threat? So we've got Reform, Green, or Conservatives, and what challenges are there? Which side do you think it's more from left or more from right?
I think it's really hard to sort of create a priority order there, because what we're seeing at the moment is people going in lots of different directions. I mean, Peterborough is a very good example of that, where we are now. In the local elections, we had the Conservatives winning seats, we had Liberal Democrats winning seats, Reform winning seats, Greens winning seats. Labour held some, but not many. So there's a real fragmentation and people going in lots of different directions. And I think a lot of that is going back to that point around traditional parties not having delivered as much. And there are various reasons for that. I think we have a situation where, as a society, sometimes politicians who are actually honest and say, look, this is really hard, we are not going to be able to sort this out straight away, are often kind of punished for that electorally, because there will be other politicians who stand up and say, no, we can sort that out very easily if you just vote for us. And people sometimes want to believe that, understandably. And I think when I look back at media interviews from, the 1970s or the 1960s, you see politicians being a lot more open about the scale of the problems. And both Labour and the Conservatives, the two dominant parties at the time, would say, look, this is really hard. Here's the way we think we're going to deal with it. Labour might say one thing, the Conservatives will say, well, we want to deal with it this other way. They're both accepting that the problem is there and that it's really difficult. Whereas now we have such a diverse mix of parties, and I think, to give out political perspective, I think Reform in particular promise easy answers, say that there's loads of money available and there's loads of wasteful spending going on in councils. But what we're seeing is that after they've been elected to those councils, suddenly they can't find any of that wasteful spending because it doesn't exist, frankly. And the opposite is true, I think, with the Green Party sometimes, who have started to say, oh, we just need to raise X, Y, Z taxes, and then we'll have loads of money to spend on things. And it's not that easy because, if you raise taxes too much on businesses, well, then you won't get businesses developing. And therefore you won't have the employment that then brings in the income tax. So everything is really complicated, frankly. And it's important that we have to, as the Labour Party, put forward a really clear vision and strategy that is believable, that people understand, that people, can get behind, regardless of kind of where they've gone to politically, because I think it's not necessarily about left and right and ideology anymore. It's about where people's trust is. And I hope that we can win back that trust by putting together kind of a strong plan again.
Thank you very much. So we've had another question. Thank you. A very direct question. Are you able to offer a work experience for deaf people in your office?
That's a really good question. So MPs don't get a dedicated budget to support work experience, which is really frustrating because it means we have to make quite difficult decisions about kind of how many placements we can offer. And sort of the more placements we offer, then kind of the less budget I have available for staff, which means that perhaps I get less work done. And so there's some really difficult trade-offs. If someone is interested, I would certainly encourage them to email me. I normally have to prioritise constituents who live in North West Cambridgeshire. But if that person can email me, I'll be very happy to sort of have a conversation and look at what can be done. But more broadly, actually, I would say there are lots of schemes available for people who want to kind of gain experience in either politics or the public sector more generally. The House of Commons runs a really good one. The civil service has some really strong internship schemes as well, I think. And equally, there's other options kind of in local government as well. Peterborough City Council has a scheme. I think it would be worth looking at the kind of accessibility of all of those schemes. I haven't necessarily spent much time looking at the civil service or the House of Commons one, so I don't know. But I would definitely encourage anyone that's interested to look at that, and kind of if they're finding that those schemes aren't very accessible, let your MP know, whether that's me or someone else, and we will absolutely be willing to go and look at that and try to get that changed to make those schemes more accessible, because that's the whole point of them, to kind of widen up opportunity to people who have been shut out of it.
Brilliant, thank you. So Andy did some work experience in 1995. He's behind the camera at the moment, but he's just commented that. Thank you, Andy. So I've got a few more questions, then we'll wrap up if that's okay. So what do you think the future direction of Labour is, and who would be the best person to lead it that way?
Well, I haven't really decided yet. I haven't met Andy Burnham, I have to say, and I always think it's not very honest of people to make a view on people that they've not even met. So I'm not going to make any comment about Andy Burnham until I've had a chance to sort of get a good sense of him and speak to him properly. I do get on very well with Wes Streeting. I think he, wants to help people. His heart and mind are in the right place. And I think he's done a very good job on the NHS. We've seen kind of patient satisfaction scores go up a lot since we came into office. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, but there's been a really significant increase. And equally, waiting lists have come down, by a really significant amount. They're now at their lowest level in about 3.5 years. So we are bringing them down, having inherited a situation where they're going up still. So I would be comfortable, certainly, under Wes's leadership of the Labour Party. And maybe that'll be the same for Andy. We'll see once I've met him.
Thank you. And do you think Keir Starmer will win the next one?
Win the next general election or the leadership election if one happens?
Sorry, the general election.
Well, I think, as I say, there's been a lot of communication problems. Although he is, an honourable, decent man who I have a lot of respect for, as I say, I've suggested that he steps down. I've asked for him to step down because, in part, I don't think his leadership is going to help us win the next general election, and that then means we won't be able to deliver for people, and it means we risk a reform government that, in my view, would be really, really damaging to the country, and it's not something that I want to let happen.
Thank you. So we'll wrap up now. I just want to say thank you so much for coming in today, sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your background, and everything about your political journey. I really appreciate you coming in and taking the time to be here today. And thank you so much to the audience as well. I really hope that the deaf community have showed that we can engage with an MP and that you can do lots for your deaf community in your area too. So just to let the audience know, next Friday, CDA are going to do a live stream again about politics. So thank you all for watching, and thank you again to Sam Carling. Thank you.
Thank you, it's been really good.
Cheers, bye.